Daniel Moss was a smart guy, but his mind was turned to work. At 28, he was the luckiest worker in the West East Company. His boss, Matthew Morgan, always said at every meeting that other employees should take Mr. Moss's example. Daniel's rise through the ranks was rapid, and one day he was suddenly the head of the entire International Relations Department. It was a tremendous success, and everyone in the firm was sympathetic to this promotion. After all, they were in agreement. With such dedication, any employee of the company deserved to be rewarded. Good money gave confidence in the future. Everything was fine. Christina Moss, Daniel's 26-year-old wife, was beautiful, slender, tall, and with memorable breasts. Her pitch-black hair gave Daniel's lover a blissful thrill. And even now, as the amazed Daniel looked at the fantastic spectacle that was taking place in his and Christie's bedroom, he saw that his wife was the most beautiful woman in the world. There was another party going on at their house that day, hosted by Christie. She felt that her husband's status gave her the right to gather her acquaintances in their home. Although it was exactly her house, her grandmother had left a beautiful mansion for her favorite granddaughter. 7 couples came to the party. The men were the older hosts. Danny knew they were the ones who had helped him and his wife deal with trouble at work. There were also executives from other companies. They were successful people who carried a solid weight in their town, the county, and even the state. The 7 middle-aged women were a match for the men. Say, even Matthew Morgan and his wife Catherine came. Danny had never seen Mrs. Morgan before these parties, a sweet and intelligent woman who loved to talk about her husband, who was her whole world to her. Everything was going traditionally, but Christina suddenly remembered that they didn't have any beer, which would be an appropriate beverage for the guests right now, so it was up to Daniel to drive to the market. Half an hour one way, half an hour back, plus the search for beer at the mart. Well, the party wouldn't suffer for the lack of a host. Danny got into his car and started it. He never argued with Christina. She was a goddess to be earned. And he, Daniel Moss, was the lucky man who had the honor of enjoying the body of a goddess. He drove 100 meters away from the house, but suddenly he remembered that he had bought 2 kegs of beer the other day and kept them in the basement. It was strange because even Christine knew that the beer was fully chilled and waiting to be consumed. Danny turned the car around and drove back. He pulled into the garage and hurried into the yard where the guests were. What a bitch. She sends her husband out for a beer and then she goes and gets our old folks. Mrs. Morgan recounted the strange information. Well, her gullible cuckold Danny doesn't even know he's been had for 3 years now. God, you've got to be born such an idiot who can't see the obvious. Mrs. Forst, Christina's boss's wife, was more blunt. Girls, what's it to you? We're paid money as escorts for our boys. We play our part and the rest is none of our business. So we're just having fun at poor Danny's expense. I don't think he deserves that fate. He just loves her too much. Some more misses spoke up in defense of Daniele, who froze around the corner of the house. He felt really sick. His eyes went black. He turned around and walked into the garage, from where he made his way into the house. His phone was in his hands and was set to record. No, he wouldn't be able to use that video in the divorce. In their state, adultery was not a cause that would be catastrophic for a cheating husband. But he was going to ruin the lives of everyone involved in this cheating. Male voices could be heard outside the bedroom door. No one had tried to close the doors. Who would want to hide from a husband who would be back in a little while, during which time everyone could sleep with the mistress? 10 minutes of embarrassing spectacle was enough for Danny. The excellent quality of the recording made it possible to identify everyone involved in the entertainment. No, he did not enjoy watching this movie. The exhausted man hurried down to the basement to his home office. He didn't take all his belongings, just the essentials. His laptop with removable storage, his personal documents, his antique coin collection, even a few $1,000s in cash, which were in the safe. After thinking for a while, Danny took his wife's laptop, too. He wished to know all the secrets of his spouse. Then he quickly went back out to the garage. The car hurried him off in the direction of downtown. But Danny was no longer looking for a beer market. He found a cafe with free internet access. He had time to do an online check of his finances. The sweep of shared accounts went quickly. He and Christina had personal cards. It was from when they first started dating. They were already working in their own companies, and the personal accounts hadn't been canceled. The plan was to do so at the time the baby was conceived. Then Danny turned on his wife's laptop and found a lot of pictures and short videos his wife had sent to 7 men she'd been having fun with for a long time. Yes, Danny, had indeed been cheated on for 3 whole years. But the most frustrating part was how his naivete was being ridiculed. Christy herself had written to her lovers that she weaned her cookie off body access for 2 days after each meeting, which happened regularly on Thursday. Even his appointment as head of the department happened because of Mr. Morgan's participation in the meetings. That's what it means to ascend to the throne through his wife. Danny was angry. He found the 7 addresses of the meeting attendees and sent the real wives of the daddies the necessary videos and a short message telling them that at this hour, the men were at the same address in the suburbs and had a spouse. Present with them are 7 ladies who were introduced as the wives of the mistress of the house's lovers. Danny even informed all of the wives that he was the husband of Christina Moss. Danny turned off his laptop and stowed it in his backpack to his own. He walked out of the cafe and headed for the ATM. A few thousand more in cash ended up in his pockets. Then he drove to the outskirts of town, to the highway that led west. He stopped near a roadside cafe and got out of the saloon. The man took one last look at the car he was used to and walked toward the highway where the trucks were traveling. The lovely party was in full swing. Christina was enjoying the euphoria that was left after the crazy sex. It felt so good. Her 7 experienced lovers knew how to pleasure her. Yes, there was a small moment that spoiled the whole picture. She had tricked her husband again today and had a crazy session of fun in his bed with men who were more like her father. It had happened 3 years ago. She was Mr. Robert Forst's secretary at the time, and during a meeting between her boss and a comrade, she was first persuaded to perform a sexual favor for 2 men. There was even paid a good amount of money. For an hour and a half, she received $1,000, and the young woman liked it. She was always paid. The number of Robert's friends grew, and soon Christine was doing favors for 7 men. She was glad that she could earn more money to, say, go with Danny on a joint vacation. It was the memories of her husband that caused Christina acute bouts of shame. Her constant cheating had dragged on. But things were going well for Danny, too. Matthew Morgan, one of Christina's lovers, had even allowed the young mistress's husband to take an executive position in their company. Tonight's party was a regular party that happened regularly every other month. Yes, Danny would be out of luck again and would have to hold out until Monday to get his usual dose of sex. No, Christina loved her husband. Loved him the way a young girl loves her boyfriend who means everything to her. But she had been on the sex needle for a very long time and couldn't give up that crazy high. The most amazing thing is that even the very thought of the fact that 7 men are sleeping with her in her own house and her husband at the same time went for a beer turned the young woman on. They finished their session and hurried to clean up the scene. Taking the sheets off the bed and opening the windows to the bedroom, Christina hurried into the shower. She wanted to wash off the marks. The men sat down next to their couples. Danny wasn't there yet, and that was odd. He should have been back from the market by now. Everyone looked subdued. The women who played the roles of wives were lovely girlfriends who were just working off their money. Christina's excitement over her husband's absence made her pick up the phone. But no matter how hard and anxious Christina tried to contact Danny, all calls were forwarded to voicemail. "What's wrong, dear hostess?" Robert could see his mistress's nervousness. "Danny should have arrived by now, and I can't reach him." Christine looked fearfully at her boss. But then something happened that no one in the room expected. For several minutes, the real wives of the 7 daddies burst into the yard. And that's when all hell broke loose. All the spouses were sent a fresh video of the men's session with Christina. Ladies from the escort just tried to hide from the anger of furious women who saw for themselves meeting for golf of their husbands. The scandal was heard by all of Christina's neighbors, and they called the police, who arrived to calm the vacationers down. And then poor Christina's parents arrived. It turns out Danny had sent them the video too. Everything was worse than ever. It seemed to Christina that the world was coming to an end. As it turned out later, all the men had lost most of their money and property through cheating. Through prenuptial agreements, their wives had sued for everything they could in their divorces. It had become a disaster, and no one understood why Danny saw something he wasn't allowed to see. Christina quit her job, but she was lucky that one of her lovers was more successful and managed to keep her business from her spouse. That's where Christina was hired, taken to eventually start the sessions again. All the men were exhausted and they needed to find comfort on the bosom of their young mistress. Life went on again, but soon had to cancel all the sessions and meetings. As it turned out, Christina was pregnant, and since the lovers never used condoms, the suspicions fell on them. Although, as the doctor's examination showed, the pregnancy had started, presumably in the period before or during the last party. Yes, Danny could be the father of the child, but the husband himself simply disappeared in an unknown direction. His car was found in the parking lot of a drive-through cafe, but there was no more phone, account, or mail service. There was one strange thread that simply disappeared as soon as it was willing to be untangled by the police who were looking for the missing Daniel Moss. A bank card in Danny's name had transferred about $90,000 to a hospital account in another state. They never had anything reassuring to say there, though. Someone needed plastic surgery, which was performed on a now unknown patient. And most surprisingly, the hospital files on that patient were hacked, and all information on John Doe was destroyed. Christina herself took what happened as punishment for cheating. Her actions had led to this situation, although all her men were angry about the lost money and destroyed families. But revenge no one offered, because no one could find the whereabouts of Daniel Moss. Even Danny's parents didn't know where their son was. He called them, but it was impossible to locate him. There was some clever system of transferring calls even through Africa where, according to the searcher, the subscriber was located. But that particular place was an incredibly vast desert where you couldn't even find people, let alone any phone towers. Danny hid safely and his search stopped in time. No one wanted to waste their money. Christina gave birth to beautiful twins. She decided to stay home for a while and not go back to work. And that led to the breakup of their love 8. The men went into retirement, and their heirs were more prudent and did not find the former mistress of former bosses a coveted trophy. For Christina, it was the best way to keep herself busy. DNA tests on the girls found no commonality with any of Christina's lovers. By the method of elimination, the young mother realized that Danny was the father, but her husband wasn't around. And about the discovery of the truth of the paternity of babies, Eliza and Beatrice learned the younger sister of Daniel, Margaret. It served to bring the two women closer together, but Danny was never even mentioned. When Danny stopped the car on that last day of his stay in his hometown, he was sure his future would be gray. The driver turned out to be an older man who was very friendly. They got to know each other. It turned out that Patrick had an almost similar situation. He too had divorced his wife because of one stupid thing that had opened the man's eyes. The curtain behind Danny's back slid open quietly, and a girl of about 20 to 22 years old emerged. She was beautiful, but the right side of her face was disfigured. And then Danny heard a rather horrifying story. Patrick was a driver and tried to please his beloved wife, Rhonda. They had a daughter, Susie, a beautiful little girl who was the centerpiece of the family. But then it turned out that Rhonda was not too concerned about the desire for sex. About her adventures began to talk even the closest of her friends. It turned out that Rhonda often left her daughter alone in the house and went to a local bar to find a lover. When Patrick received a call from acquaintances and told about another party Rhonda in a local bar, he hurried home. His flight ended that day. But his wife didn't know about it. Little Susie had always been inquisitive. But on that cursed day, she explored every room on the second floor of the mansion. And then the worst happened. She just couldn't hold onto the steps and rolled down onto the ceramic tiles of the floor. Patrick was the first to see the mangled face of his daughter, who couldn't even cry. There was no one in the house. The man grabbed his daughter and drove to the hospital. He called a friend who was a divorce attorney and told his story. At the hospital, where the little girl was given help, the two friends and decided the future of Patrick and Rhonda's marriage. Rhonda arrived home the next morning. She was drunk, but a blood stain that was near the steps startled the woman. The baby was nowhere to be found. So the woman went to the police. And then it was learned that she had put her daughter in mortal danger and was to blame for Susie's facial injuries. The husband, who arrived early, wouldn't even talk to his wife. Rhonda was forbidden to go near the house where Patrick and Susie lived. Any visits with her daughter were not even mentioned. The judge felt the woman was a danger to her daughter. Custody of Susie was given to Patrick, who was trying to survive in this cruel world. Rhonda's parents wanted to reconcile the former spouses, but Patrick refused to even talk to the woman who, for the sake of casual sex, left her daughter alone in the house. Father and daughter learned to survive in this world. All the money went to small plastic surgeries, but, for a greater effect, needed a lot of money. In time, the girl came to terms with her ugliness. She realized that her father was doing everything to make her comfortable in this life. When Susie graduated from high school, she refused to go to college, even though she was quite good at computers. She became her father's partner in the automobile business. They sold the old house and lived most of the time in the automobile, although they did have a small one-bedroom apartment in their hometown. With her mom, the girl never reconciled, although Rhonda herself for a while did not consider herself guilty of the disaster. Only years later, the woman was able to come to her senses, but the daughter refused to communicate with her mother, who didn't need her in her distant childhood years. Yes, I thought my case was the worst. But you know, your life is even unpleasant. Danny looked at the girl and tried to understand how she might have felt on that distant, tragic day. Yeah, I'm used to it. The girl spoke to him for the first time. Her voice was incredibly beautiful. Used to it? You know, how much money do you need to do a full recovery course? Danny suddenly decided that he should do something nice for these people. Well, we already have 100,000. 75 more and my little girl will have her beauty back. She's already the most beautiful girl in the world. I'll do anything to make her the same as before. Patrick was excited. He was reliving the past pain again. This young man had made him tell a terrible story. But the guy had been hurt too, right? 75. I have that money, and I can be found by it. I can transfer the amount to the hospital, and you'll pay for the operation and the stay in the ward. Let's say tomorrow morning we find a cafe with internet, and I'll make the transfer. May your daughter, Mr. Patrick, soon get her lost past back. And I don't care if I can be found by the transfer. I'll just go to some backwoods place where no one will find me. Danny looked at the surprised father and daughter. But, Danielle, you don't know us! Patrick was shocked. Oh, forget it. I just want to do something I think is right at the moment. Danny smiled. I'll help you hide, Mr. Daniel. Susie didn't hide her tears. I'll be able to hack into the hospital server, and no one will ever know about us. Yes, that's what happened. After transferring the entire amount to the hospital account, the girl was put in a room and began preparations for surgery. In the meantime, Danny settled in Patrick's apartment. The man even helped the guy to find a job in a small company. A month and a half later, Susie came home from the hospital. Her face was fixed. She was happy, and the culprit of her happiness was a man who had just decided to help them. Christina filed for divorce a year and a half after that party, and their marriage ended. That's what Danny's sister told her. It was with Susie's return from the hospital that the two young people began to get closer. Danny insisted that the girl went to school, and Susie received the long-awaited diploma of a specialist in computer technology. After the final divorce of the young man, the girl herself insisted on the beginning of the relationship. She owed almost everything to her savior, and now wished to do everything necessary to make Danny feel happy. They got married 3 months after receiving Daniel's divorce papers. It was on their wedding day that the excited girl confessed that she was a little pregnant. This event caused even more happiness for Danny himself. And Patrick was over the moon with joy. The young family settled in a cozy house, and a frequent guest in it was the happy future grandfather. One Sunday, there was a knock on their door. Danny opened the door himself. Patrick and Susie were sitting in the living room playing with their 6-month-old baby, Patricia. Standing in front of the man was an unknown woman in her 50s. Her look was nervous. Danny smiled and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with, Mrs.? Well, I think I have a favor to ask of you. Yeah, my name is Rhonda, and I'm the mother of your wife." The woman was worried. She realized that this young man was already familiar with all the horrible history of the past. Mrs. Rhonda, I think Susie and Patrick are in the living room right now. They're playing with little Patricia. I agree to let you two see each other. But I don't know how they're going to react to you seeing them. So, let me be the first to tell them about you. Danny allowed the woman to enter the house. She obediently sat down in the offered chair, and Danny went into the living room. You know, we have a guest. Just know I don't want to kick her out, but I think you could at least manage not to try to kill her. Danny was worried. Is my mom here? Susie looked at her husband anxiously. I dreamed about her today. Daddy, let her come in. You know, our past is in the distant past. Yes, I haven't forgotten that pain, but Danny, would you please get Mommy? Everyone sat in silence as Rhonda entered the room. The family idol she saw was a blow to her. Tears streamed from her eyes. Rhonda knelt down and spoke softly to her former family. I'm sorry. Please forgive me for everything, for all the pain I've caused you, I'm sorry. Mom, I'd like you to meet your granddaughter, Patricia, and this is my beloved husband, Daniel. Get up off your knees, Mom. I'm glad you came to visit us. Susie walked over to the woman and helped her to her feet. You've lost so much weight. Even too much. I'm glad. I'm sorry. Rhonda hugged her daughter. She saw the beautiful face of her little girl who had forgiven her mother's great stupidity. Yes, Rhonda had always known about Susie's past. She had come to school and secretly watched her girl. She'd been to the hospital when necessary surgeries took place, but then Patrick took his daughter on near-constant trips. But now her daughter is happily by the side of a man who, Rhonda learned, helped pay for the surgery and made her daughter's life happy. It's okay. You can come visit us for a visit. I'm sure Patricia and I would enjoy your company. Susie smiled at her father. She didn't want to rebuild her family, but she didn't want to cause a new wave of pain for anyone. Dad, will you help Danny set the table? I've got everything ready. Okay, I agree. Patrick and Danny went into the kitchen. Seeing his daughter happy was the most satisfying thing for a father. Will you stay for lunch with us, Mom? Is there someone waiting for you at home? Susie sat down on the couch. Rhonda cautiously sat down next to her. If no one minds, I think I'll stay. And at home, I'm living on my own after no one's waiting for me. A new batch of tears washed the older woman's face. Calm down, Mom. See, your granddaughter wants to play with you. Susie smiled at her mother and placed the baby girl in her grandmother's lap. Yes, they had almost made up. No one at the dinner table was reminiscing about the past. What mattered was the present and the future. Let it be in the memory were those terrible days, but in that memory live different terrible memories, which in time no one raises out. Christina was surprised when she learned that her ex-husband had married a second time. This woman was told about it by Margaret. As it turned out, everything at Daniel was fine. Beautiful children, a happy wife, and a lot of love, all that Christine herself had lost. Lately, the young woman had been plagued by heart problems. She'd been worrying too much. Too many of her past mistakes had left an incurable mark in her heart. The only solace for the tired woman was her 2 daughters. They were now 9 years old. 9 terrible years that had been Christine's punishment for her 3 years of debauchery. And each new day was the same punishment. Christina went to the hospital for a checkup, and it was suggested that she be hospitalized. The woman's heart was too weak. It all went beyond the hospital, and Margaret was the first to check on her former relative. Hey, Chris, what are you doing, sick? I took your girls back to my place, but you stay here and heal. They need you. You know, Marge, I have a favor to ask of you. Let Daniel know that I'm in the hospital and his daughter. I've already signed the relinquishment papers and authorized the adoption. He'll be the sole custodian. I don't know how much longer I will last, but I want the girls to be happy, Christina cried. Chris, stop it. You're going to get out of here and enjoy the girls' successes. Margaret was worried. Christina didn't look well. Oh, and the doctor's prognosis wasn't favorable. Yes, but I want the girls to have a father. I won't be able to give them the happiness they deserve. I've already transferred all my savings to them, just like my insurance is on both of them too. I guess if I can't, well, then they'll have a normal future." Christina suddenly felt calm. Margaret had called Daniel. He already knew that the girls were his biological daughters. After conferring with his wife, Daniel drove to his hometown, where he got Margaret's paperwork on the children. That afternoon, 4 visitors entered Christina's room. "Hi, Christy. How are you?" Danny looked at his ex-wife with a strange concern. "Hi, Danny. As you can see, everything around here is beeping and keeping me awake," Christina joked. Yes, she missed talking to her ex-husband. "Mommy and Daddy is taking us to his place. You're coming to visit us later, right?" Beatrice smiled demurely. "Yes, dear. Mommy will come. Later. But you behave yourself there. I'll be ashamed to know you've been rude." Christina was talking to her daughters, but her eyes were studying her ex-husband. "You and Aunt Marge go get yourselves something from the machine in the hallway. We need to talk to your daddy." As the doors closed behind the girls and Margaret, Christina was the first to break the silence. "I'm sorry, Danny. I guess I don't need to tell you how stupid I've been. Look after them. If everything goes well with me, I'll come and check on them. Of course, if you'll let me." "What do the doctors say?" Danny tried not to show excitement. He would never have believed that the cheerful Christina could look so haggard. "Well, they promise. They know how to promise, and I believe them. You know, I'm asking you to forgive me. It'll make me feel better. It'll just make me feel better." Christina looked straight into Daniel's eyes. "You know, my Susie taught me to forgive and to look forward to the future. I honestly and sincerely forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago, Christy. And I'll look after the girls. They'll need time to realize that I'm their father. They already have a sister, Patricia, and a brother, Mark. I think I'll do everything I can to make them happy. But you have to promise me that you'll come and see them. They're going to need your support. You hear me? Promise to come." Danny was determined. He really had become a real man in these 9 years. "Yes, I'll come. I'll need to see them often. But you be the best father to them, too." Christina didn't hide her tears. Daniel's arrival with his 2 daughters was greeted with enthusiasm. The entire Moss family was excited to have new girls in their home. Even Rhonda called the twins granddaughters. And Patrick was simply overwhelmed by the sight of them. He called Susie's 2 children the most beautiful, and the 2 new daughters were the same. No, Patrick and Rhonda didn't move in together. Too much of the past reminded them of the pain they had endured. But as parents, they had begun to make up beautifully, successfully playing the role of grandparents to the younger members of their family. And, as Susie suspected, her parents seemed to have become such friends with special favors for each other. But they just spent time together sometimes. Rhonda hadn't tried to move into Patrick's apartment for permanent residence, though. Just sex and no commitment. Especially since, if they were honest, they never dated anyone else after the divorce. The fault was the bad memories that ruined any relationship. Christine, to everyone's dismay, never came to see her daughters. She died in the hospital a few days after Danny had informed her that he had long forgiven her for cheating on him.